Do autistic people lack empathy? I don't even know where to start with this one. The short answer is, well, I don't think there is a short answer. As much as any of you will be screaming at the screen to me right now, no, this is a massive myth. And it is a myth because it's a massive generalization. Some autistic people do struggle with empathizing and will forever. But that's only because autism is quite diverse and our experiences are quite diverse, and empathy isn't as simple as something you either do or don't have. We may have closed off our empathy, or we may feel empathy only for certain people, and a lot of us don't even know what empathy is because it is not as simple as it is made out to be. So first of all, what is empathy? So I think even within any definition I find, it is a struggle to really define what empathy is. Some of us say empathy is feeling for other people. And some of us say it's knowing what it feels like to be in a situation that someone's in. They're very different things. Okay, feeling for someone else would be, I don't know, would it be mirroring their feelings in those moments? And knowing what it's like, that would be feeling for ourselves, surely. So is empathy feeling for someone else, or is it feeling for ourselves in a same or similar situation? So I can tell you that often a lot of autistic people tell me that autistic people don't under-empathize with people, or autistic people don't lack empathy, we actually empathize too much. That is, you've been through difficult things yourself, and therefore if you see someone else going through difficulty, you feel too much for them, and that can leave you very vulnerable because that person can then use that. We have been through a lot of difficult things ourselves. We have been bullied, we have been ostracized, we have been victimized, we have been harassed. We've had a lot of negative stuff. We've had a lot of stuff that's unfair or unjust. And so as a result of that, if we see injustices, if we see someone else who's been hurt or harmed, we can feel a lot for them. We've been there. We know what it's like. Okay? That can sometimes mean we are too supportive of someone else we see struggling. We can leave ourselves vulnerable. We try and help people that we can't help, or that would be damaging to us emotionally to help, or somebody that is not in a place where they can appreciate that help, or that may use that help. Maybe not purposefully, maybe they'll just ask for too much and we won't put up our own boundaries to say, I can't anymore. It's very hard if you're supporting someone else going through a difficult time to say no sometimes, because you see how much they hurt, how much pain they're in. That can lead to what we call over-empathizing. It's your choice whether you see that as empathy or whether you see that as feeling for yourself in that situation, or a mixture of all, because it's probably a mixture. It is a situation a lot of us end up in where we do feel too much for other people, and that causes us harm. As a result, some people actually may feel less empathy towards others, not because they don't feel empathy, but because they've learned to shut it off. They've learned to turn away from feeling to other people because they're already experiencing too much themselves. Things are already overwhelming for themselves, or they've learned that by feeling that is danger, that is a risk. So that's the reason why some autistic people might not express a lot of empathy, or why some autistic people might not seem to experience empathy. Maybe they save their empathy for their loved ones, their close friends, their family members, but not for you in the situation. A lot of autistic people, for that same reason, cannot socially interact. They may avoid it. They may be very short or blunt answers because they don't want to engage with a new person. They don't want to feel for a new person because that is danger. It's risk. You don't know if that person's going to abuse you, abuse your trust, is going to use you, going to drain you. It can be a lot of mental and physical energy to engage and to feel for another person. So you may turn away from it. In some situations, having too much empathy is great. Helps someone with their job, helps them with their social situations, their friendships. Another situation, that may be bad. In another situation, we all want to feel less empathy. Empathy is also based on our experiences. And a lot of autistic people have grown up being pushed out, being bullied, being misunderstood. So that may mean we've not had the same social opportunities. We've not had the same opportunities to develop empathy. What I mean by that is, I can empathize with somebody that has lost a loved one because I've been there. If I hadn't have been there, it's definitely going to be harder to feel for that other person. Maybe I'm not actually feeling empathy. Maybe I'm feeling sympathy. Or maybe I care about that person, so I'm sad because someone I care about is sad. Or I want them to be happy, so maybe that's a selfish thing because I want to be happy with them and I want somebody I care about to be happy. Is that empathy? I can't really tell you what that is. But the point is experience. We go through things in life and they allow us to emotionally relate. They allow us to know what it feels like to be in that situation. And that is part of what we call empathy. And that is based on experience. If you have lacked social opportunities growing up, or you get those social opportunities later in life, you may not be able to empathize with others as well because you haven't been there. And also, even if you do get those later in life, it takes time to emotionally process things. Sometimes you need to go through certain social situations numerous times in order to process, to understand. And that may mean that even if you get those experiences in adulthood, because you've missed them in your younger years, you may never develop the ability to fully apply them or empathize them. Within that is emotional processing. If you have grown up different and you've been told from a young age your emotions are weird and usual, you sent those messages to people, I don't understand your emotions, you learn to maybe not trust your own emotions, to be quicker to dismiss them because other people are. If you have more difficulty recognizing and expressing your own emotions and you're going through things, your ability to express, to connect with others is also going to be impacted. Part of empathy towards others is our ability to express that we feel the same, that we've been in that situation, that we understand, that we can connect. And if we don't express that we understand that we're there with that other person the same way, someone else can think that we're not empathizing with them because maybe we are inside, but we're not showing it. I often have situations where if I see someone going through hardship, I will not empathize, not give them anything. And that's not a lack of empathy. That for me is, I'm aware that I've been around a lot of people with pain conditions throughout my life. And if they're in a lot of pain and everybody flocks to them, that can make them center of attention. And that's sometimes the last thing they want. That's anxiety inducing. I also know, Autism 101 with meltdowns, if you give someone more stimulation, that's likely to make it worse or not help them. So I will often, if I see someone distressed, my way of expressing care is to not go to them. It is to leave them to recover. That is me feeling for them. I can look at them and go, I know the natural instinct. And I feel it with myself. If someone I care about is distressed, I want to go there and help. I actually want to even, physically hold them, to hug them, to reassure them. But actually that can be bad. And actually maybe empathy in that situation is me actually showing nothing at all because that's what they need. Tough one is empathy. Knowing what to do in a situation. Those autistic people often don't know what to do in a situation, which again, may mean we don't know how to express that we feel or we care. Knowing what to do, that's a difficult one. If you've learned to not trust your emotions from a young age, you're not as likely to sit with them, to process them. You're going to have a harder time expressing, recognizing them in yourself. And part of recognizing others' emotions is understanding your own. Part of recognizing others is recognizing themselves. As part of that, we've also got to talk about sensory processing. If you have sensory differences, a lot of senses are in the body. You got your muscles, you got your sense of hunger, of tiredness, of your bowels moving. They are connected to our emotions. If you have differences in how you recognize your heartbeat, you may be less or more attuned to noticing stress. Or maybe not more attuned. You think you're stressed or anxious when you're not. You're just focusing on your heartbeat. If you're more sensitive to the sensation of your stomach or your intestine, you could misinterpret that bloatedness as butterflies in the stomach and thus anxiety. If you're more attuned or not getting the sensory needs you need around your muscles, you may feel restless, and that may feel like agitation, irritation, anxiety, annoyance. So our sensory sensations can get confused with our emotional sensations. And if you have difficulty recognizing your own emotions, you're going to have more difficulty recognizing and communicating to other people. So we've got those in the mix that may mean that there's that barrier to empathizing or to empathizing correctly. We often have media, which is another one, show us that when people are sad, they cry. When people are happy, they laugh. But I know for certain when I'm in an awkward situation, I smile and I don't want to smile. And I have been to enough funerals and situations to know that people will hysterically laugh in situations where you're told it's not appropriate. How as humans actually interact emotionally to a situation is diverse. So there is not necessarily one way to show that you care, to empathize, to feel when you see someone else distressed. In our evolutionary history, we grew up in smaller communities where people would likely have known us from birth. We will always be a part of that community. There is context behind how we interact and how we feel. We've not just grown up with those people, so we care more about them. And from a selfish point of view, we have more invested in them. They also know, we know what they want in a situation. They know how we interact. And that would form part of empathy. It would also form part of us understanding their minds. We'd have more time to understand their minds. We'd have more conversation. We'd see that set of people, more diverse people, because we wouldn't have necessarily been raised by one mother and one father. We would be more part of a community. Very different types of social interaction that will affect our ability to empathize and understand others' minds. Nowadays, we grow up in very, very different circumstances where we are told there is a set way of doing something, a set way of feeling, a set way of expressing those feelings. And that unfortunately leaves autistic people not only traumatized by those very negative messages about how we feel and how we should interact, but also it makes it more harder in those situations for all of us, autistic or not, to feel, to express, to connect. If I went to a friend and I said, I'm having trouble with this situation right now, and I gave them that self-story about the trouble I was having, the way a friend would often respond to me is with a self-story back. So I've just told them, I'm having this big problem right now, and they've gone, here's a problem I'm having, or here's a problem I had in the past, back to me. That seems strange, doesn't it? Doesn't that seem strange to you? Like, I've come with them, I said, this is really upsetting me. And they've responded back with something about themselves. How selfish. Why would you do that? That's what onlookers think. That's what people around think. People can often see autistic people interacting and hear self-story, 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 self-story back and forth. It can seem like both people in that conversation are making the conversation all about themselves. They're not actually listening, they're not empathizing, not connecting. That's terrible, they can think. Selfish. But that's not what's happening. When I go to that friend with my story about what's going on for me, and they respond with a story about themselves, they're not making the conversation about themselves to me. They are showing me, here's a situation that I have been in where I felt in a certain way, where I felt the same as you, or where I feel I felt the same as you. I can understand. I have been there. You are not alone. That is the message that I'm getting by that self-story. And if that self-story they've given me doesn't match up with the amount of emotional context I'm trying to communicate I'm feeling to them, I often give them a self-story back to help them get to to understand, or to take their experience and to show them how my experience is different or the same. Self-story, self-story, self-story. It's also emotional processing. Again, you're not alone. That's the message you're getting from someone else. I have been there. I understand you. This is how I dealt with a situation similar. Or this is how I didn't deal and how confusing it was for me. They're powerful messages. If somebody instead was to just say, oh, Loren, that sounds really hard. That sounds really difficult. I don't know how you coped in that situation. To me, that doesn't sound like empathy. That can be sometimes just frustrating, insulting. It can show they don't care, that they're not thinking about their answers. They're not even trying to be open or connect with me. Part of empathy is connection. It is part of being open. It is part of being vulnerable. Autistic people, number one, all the negative experiences. Are we less or more likely to be vulnerable with new people? Perhaps less likely so. And empathy does require vulnerability to show it. And if somebody in that situation where you've come in with a problem you're having and they respond back, that sounds really tough, that can sometimes just sound like words. Sometimes that sounds really tough can be just what we need. But to say, just say the words, that sounds really tough, and for it to land it to another person in the way that says, I've been there, I understand. You need to use the right tone. You need to use the right pauses, the right moment. You need to use the right emphasis, the right points on those letters, the words you're using. A lot of autistic people, that's a tough call to get right. If you're doing that to us as autistic people, well, you know, a lot of us struggle with intonation and tone and pacing and timing. So if you show your empathy by saying that's very difficult, we may completely miss that you actually understand. We may just hear the words. A lot of us just hear words in situations, okay, not the subtext, not the context around it. So you're already failing to empathize with us. And if we try and empathize with you that way and we get any part of it wrong, we send across the message that we don't understand at all, that we're not on the same level as you, which immediately makes you feel like you're not understood. And if you just opened up, you've been vulnerable to someone and you miss that mark, you miss showing the other person you get it, massive disconnect. So again, how autistic people express empathy may be different. Me and my friends talking, to you, that can look like we do not understand or we're talking about ourselves in that situation. But to us, the self-story actually makes us feel listened and understood. And if we both are using different languages to communicate our empathy, we are fundamentally going to misunderstand each other and send across the wrong message. This is what we call the double empathy problem. Okay, this is where an autistic person may express their empathy in a certain way that you can't understand, but you are also, as the neurotypical, are expressing your empathy as a way an autistic person cannot understand. We are both misunderstanding each other. We are both lacking the correct way to communicate our empathy to each other. It's not just the autistic person that lacks the empathy or the way of expressing it. It's the neurotypical that lacks the empathy or the way of expressing it to the autistic person. Now, if you are different in society, often the ownership is put on you to interact in the other's language, in the other's communication style. And if you don't, you're the one that lacks empathy. You're the one that has the problem. The emphasis is strangely not put on the neurotypical mind to express empathy, to meet us part way. So I would say you need to meet us part way. You need to understand how autistic people express empathy, how it might be different, or how it can look like it's not empathy when actually it is. Or all the stuff to do with trauma that may mean that we may be protecting ourselves or feeling too much, keeping us safe. So if you want to help us, it's understanding that our expressions might be different, that there isn't a lack of empathy in a situation. It's that we communicate that empathy differently. And some of the ways we communicate that empathy may look like the opposite of empathy to you. They may look like complete disregard. For me, ignoring someone in pain, to us talking about ourselves, it can seem like we are doing the exact opposite thing when actually we are not. It's such a fundamental message to get. And if you don't get it, you can get completely the wrong idea about us, and we can get completely the wrong idea about you.